Imagine yourself in a candlelit chamber, the air thick with the scent of herbs, mold, and something far more unsettling, a faint, metallic tang that hints at secrets best left undisturbed. Shelves creak under the weight of jars labeled in Latin, filled with powders and tinctures. Among them one word recurs: mumia. In this world, the boundaries between life and death are not just blurred, they are actively crossed. As desperate men and women consume the remains of the dead in the hope of healing, strength, and even spiritual salvation, this is not a scene from a nightmare. This is medieval Europe, where the lie that made people eat the dead was not just believed, it was celebrated. Let's tear away the sanitized vision of medieval medicine. Forget the gentle image of monks tending gardens and brewing herbal teas. Here, in the shadow of every cathedral, in the bustling markets of London, Paris, and Rome, human remains are bought, sold, ground, and swallowed. The contradiction is immediate and jarring. A Christian continent, obsessed with the sanctity of the body, yet eagerly devouring the flesh and blood of the dead. How did such a paradox take root? The answer begins with a single, shocking revelation. For centuries, Europeans believed that consuming human remains could heal the sick, restore youth, and even grant spiritual power. This was not a fringe practice. Physicians prescribed powdered skull for headaches, human fat for wounds, and tinctures of blood for epilepsy. The most prized ingredient of all was mumia, the ground-up flesh of Egyptian mummies, imported at great expense and consumed as a miracle cure. Imagine the psychological leap required to see a corpse not as a memento mori, but as medicine. But where did this belief come from? The roots are tangled in a medieval lie, one that began with a mistranslation, a misunderstanding, and a desperate hope. In the ancient world, bitumen, a sticky tar-like substance, was used for embalming. The Arabic word for bitumen, mumia, was mistranslated by European scholars as mummy, and soon the preserved flesh of Egyptian corpses was mistaken for a potent drug. Apothecaries and physicians, eager for cures and profits, spread the word. Here was a substance with the power to heal all ills, drawn from the mysterious wisdom of the East. The demand for mumia exploded. During the Crusades, European soldiers encountered the drug firsthand, believing it could heal wounds and fractures. As supplies of natural bitumen from Persia and the Dead Sea dwindled, attention turned to the tombs of Egypt. The result was a gruesome trade. Mummies dug from ancient graves, ground into powder, and shipped across Europe by the ton. The trade became so lucrative that when genuine mummies ran short, forgers created mumia falsa from the bodies of executed criminals or the recently dead, dried and treated to resemble the real thing. Apothecaries in France and Italy were known to steal bodies by night, embalm them with salt, bake them in ovens, and sell the flesh as authentic medicine. This was not a practice confined to the desperate or the ignorant. Royalty, clergy, and the learned elite all partook. King Francis I of France reportedly never traveled without a mixture of mumia and rhubarb, ready to treat any injury. King Charles II of England sipped the king's drops, a tincture containing human skull and alcohol. The poor, unable to afford the costly compounds of the apothecary, gathered at public executions, paying the hangman for a cup of still warm blood, believed to contain the very spirit of life itself. In Germanic lands, the executioner was seen not just as a bringer of death, but as a healer, his grisly wares in high demand. Pause and consider the psychological landscape of medieval Europe. Imagine living in a world where disease is everywhere, and medicine is little more than guesswork. Plagues sweep through cities, wiping out entire families overnight. The Church promises salvation, but not relief from pain. In this world, hope is a rare and precious commodity. If a respected physician or priest tells you that the secret to health lies in the bones of the dead, would you dare to doubt it? The fear of death, the longing for life? The authority of traditional combine to make the unbelievable seem not just plausible, but necessary. The irony is almost unbearable. In a society obsessed with purity, relics, and the sacredness of the body, people willingly cross the ultimate taboo. The act of eating the dead was transformed from a horror into a sacrament, a ritual of healing and faith. The apothecary's shop became a site of both hope and horror, where the boundaries between life and death, the sacred and the profane, blurred into dust. This is not just a story of superstition or ignorance. It is a window into the deepest fears and desires of the medieval mind, a mind willing to believe anything, do anything, if it meant a chance at survival. As we peel back the layers of this strange and grisly history, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the most monstrous acts are born not of evil, but of hope. And the lies we tell ourselves in the name of healing can be more powerful than any disease. But the story does not end here. In the next section, we'll delve into the psychological and cultural forces that made this lie so irresistible, and how the hunger for healing turned Europe's greatest taboo into a thriving industry, one that would haunt the continent for centuries. Close your eyes and imagine the moment the apothecary's door creaks open. A noblewoman enters, her face gaunt with illness, her eyes desperate for hope. She clutches a pouch of coins, her last. Perhaps Anne pleads for a cure. The apothecary, robed in the authority of science and tradition, reaches for a jar of fine brown powder. Ground mummy, it's the most precious medicine of the age. He measures it carefully, his hands steady, his voice calm as he assures her of its potency. She swallows it, grimacing at the taste, but clinging to the promise that she is consuming not just flesh, but the distilled essence of ancient kings, the wisdom of lost empires, the very power of life over death. This is the psychological heart of the medieval lie. The act of eating the dead was not just tolerated, it was rationalized, justified, even sanctified. In a world where disease was relentless and cures were rare, the boundaries of morality bent beneath the weight of desperation. The logic was compelling. If relics of saints could heal by touch, why not the flesh of those preserved by mysterious ancient arts? If the body was the vessel of the soul, then surely consuming it could transfer strength, youth, or even virtue. The medical authorities of the day reinforced these beliefs. The most respected physicians, men like Paracelsus and Guy de la Fontaine, wrote treatises, extolling the virtues of mumia and other human remedies. Medical texts described how to prepare the flesh, best times to harvest blood, the precise ailments each part could cure. The skull was for headaches and epilepsy, the fat for bruises and wounds, the blood for vitality and spiritual ailments. The practice was not hidden in shadows. It was debated in universities, prescribed in royal courts, and administered in hospitals. But the psychological toll was profound. Imagine being a patient, told by everyone you trust that the only hope for your child, your spouse, yourself, lies in the consumption of the dead. The act is both horrifying and hopefuller communion with the ancient, a transgression against the sacred. Some recoiled, but many more complied, driven by the terror of death and the authority of those who claimed to know best. The rituals became normalized, the taste of human powder as familiar as bitter herbs, the sight of blood as unremarkable as wine. The systematic brutality of the practice is staggering. The demand for human remains led to the desecration of graves across Europe and the Middle East. Egyptian tombs were emptied, their occupants reduced to dust and profit. When supplies ran low, the recently executed, the poor, and the marginalized became the next resource. Bodies were stolen from gallows and graveyards, dried in ovens, and sold as fresh mumia. The executioner, once a figure of fear, became a purveyor of medicine, his hands stained not just with guilt, but with the hope of the desperate. This cannibalistic trade was not just economic, it was cultural. The consumption of the dead became a ritual, a sign of faith in the power of science and the wisdom of the ancients. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, from the royal court to the village square. The contradiction was rarely questioned. After all, if the king himself drank the king's drops, who was anyone to doubt its efficacy? And yet, beneath the surface, unease simmered. Some theologians and philosophers began to question the morality of the practice. Was it truly healing, or was it a desecration? Was it a miracle, or a monstrous perversion? The church, so often the guardian of the body's sanctity, was caught in a bend, able to denounce a practice so widespread, yet unable to fully endorse it. The result was a collective silence, a tacit agreement to look away from the horror in the name of hope. The historical irony is sharp. The very culture that revered relics, that built cathedrals to house the bones of saints, became the same culture that ground up the dead for profit and survival. The boundaries between sacred and profane, between healing and harm, dissolved in the crucible of fear and longing. The lie endured because it was useful, because it offered a sliver of hope in a world ruled by uncertainty. But the story does not end with the closing of the apothecary's door. In the next section, we'll reveal how this medieval lie began to unravel, how science, skepticism, and changing attitudes toward the body transformed the way we see death, medicine, and the price we're willing to pay for hope. And we'll confront the uncomfortable echoes that linger in our own world, where the hunger for miracle cures and the fear of mortality still drive us to the edge of reason. The medieval lie that made people eat the dead and why they believed it. Weaving together the systematic brutality, historical irony, and modern parallels, and bringing your narrative arc to a powerful close. Now, the candlelight flickers on the edge of a new era. The apothecary's jars, once prized and fiercely guarded, are still lined with their grisly powders, but outside, the world is changing. The Renaissance dawns, not just with art and discovery, but with a new spirit of skepticism. A willingness to question the old authorities and probe the boundaries of truth and tradition. The medieval lie that made people eat the dead is about to meet its reckoning. Imagine the first whispers of doubt. Physicians begin to notice that mumia, once hailed as a universal cure, often fails to heal. Some patients sicken further, others die, and the promised miracles never materialize. The rise of anatomy and scientific observation exposes the fraud at the heart of the trade. Mumia is often nothing more than ground-up corpses from local graveyards, mixed with tar and spices to mimic the real thing. Reports emerge of apothecaries caught selling forgeries of bodies stolen and desecrated for profit. The faith that once bound Europe to this grisly ritual begins to unravel, thread by thread. But the unraveling is not just scientific, it is moral. Theologians and philosophers, emboldened by the new climate of inquiry, speak out more forcefully. Is it truly healing to consume the dead, or is it a violation of the sacred order? The Church, long silent, starts to condemn the practice more openly, denouncing it as both sinful and superstitious. Laws are passed to protect graves, to punish body snatchers, to regulate the apothecaries who once thrived on the trade in human flesh. Yet even as the jars of mumia gather dust, and the laws tighten around the trade in human remains, the shadows of the old beliefs refuse to vanish completely. In the quiet corners of Europe, some apothecaries continued to sell their dwindling stocks to the desperate and the credulous. Stories circulate of secret remedies, of forbidden powders passed hand to hand, of old women who swear by the power of the dead. The hunger for hope, it seems, is not so easily extinguished. Meanwhile, the legacy of this medieval lie seeps into the collective memory. Artists, writers, and philosophers use it as a symbol of the dangers of blind faith and the seductive power of tradition. The tale of eating the dead becomes a cautionary story retold, to warn against the next miracle cure, the next seductive promise. It is a reminder that the line between healing and harm is often drawn not by science, but by fear and longing. Even as the practice fades, its echoes linger. The hunger for miracle cures, no matter how bizarre or dangerous, remains. In the centuries that follow, Europe will chase other panaceas. Mercury for syphilis, radium for vitality, snake oil for every ill. The names change, the methods evolve, but the underlying fear is the same. The terror of death, the longing for hope, willingness to believe in the impossible, these are constants woven into the human story. The irony is sharp. The very culture that once consumed the dead in the name of life becomes obsessed with purity, with scientific rigor, with the boundaries of the body. The old jars of mumia gather dust, their labels fading as medicine moves on to new frontiers. Yet the lesson endures. When fear and hope collide, even the most unthinkable acts can become normalized until, at last, the truth forces us to confront what we have become. Look to our own world, and the reflection is unmistakable. Today, we may not grind bones or sip blood, but the hunger for youth, health, and immortality still drives us to extremes. Miracle diets, unproven supplements, experimental procedures, all promise salvation, all exploit the same ancient fears. The ghosts of the medieval apothecary linger in every promise of a quick fix, every desperate hope for a cure. So, as the last candle gutters out in that ancient shop, ask yourself, What lies do we still believe, and what price are we willing to pay for hope? The story of the medieval lie that made people eat the dead is not just a tale of superstition. It is a mirror reflecting the deepest anxieties of the human heart. And until we learn to face those fears with reason and compassion, the hunger for miracles will always find new forms, new victims, and new lies to tell. Ultimately, the journey from the apothecary's shadowed shelves to the bright laboratories of modern medicine is a testament to the resilience of human hope, and the peril of letting that hope blind us. The true lesson is not to mock the past, but to understand it, to recognize how easily the extraordinary can become ordinary. When fear reigns and authority goes unchallenged, the hunger for miracles is part of what makes us human, but so too is the courage to seek truth, even when it is uncomfortable. The ghosts of the medieval apothecary will always haunt the margins of our imagination, warning us that every age has its own lies waiting to be believed, waiting to be exposed. And perhaps in that awareness we find the real cure, not in the bones of the dead, but in the clarity of reason, the humility to question, and the wisdom to remember that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we most want to believe.